This episode discusses potentially sensitive and triggering topics. Viewer discretion is advised, and as always, your mental health is a priority, and please consider either skipping the episode or reaching out to local resources. Remember, you are never alone.
3, 2, 1, 0.
All right, good evening, everybody. We got the great Chris Colombo here with us tonight from Functional Mentoring, an old friend, played hockey together. We're in the military together. We're pushing back probably 10 years at this point, even though it doesn't seem that far away. But yeah, Chris, great to have you tonight. Great to, we're all looking forward to listening to what you have to say about your programs and kind of your career and some tie-ins to mental health. And then maybe some of your transition from the military just to help those folks, military folks that are listening to us. But yeah, like I said, welcome, and I'll let you kick it off and maybe tell us a little bit about yourself.
Thanks for having me. First of all, I really appreciate it, Josh. And it's good to connect, regardless of what. And, calling me great, I think you may have taken a couple too many pucks to the head, but well.
That's true, maybe.
I'm Christopher Colombo. That's not a joke. My parents did that to me. Retired Army critical care physician. So 20 years active and 4 in the reserves in med school. Some deployed time and really did almost exclusively intensive care, and some internal medicine work as well, training residents. And actually the end of my career was more on the research side of the house, working with the special ops community and field medics, trying to get technology tuned up for them. Tech firms trying to create the next widget to make medics' life in the field easier. So, focused on resource limited care and austere environment care. And then since retiring, like you said, the time goes, man, 3 years ago now, 3 years plus.
That's crazy. It's fast.
Yeah. You blink and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I'm that guy in the PX with the retired ID now. I got into executive coaching and positive psychology coaching. A colleague of mine that retired, we shared an office at the end of our career together. It's funny, put the two colonels in a box because nobody else could deal with us. She got out and got into executive coaching, and having a kind of a peer mentoring breakfast lunch kind of with her, I realized one of the things that I missed from active duty time was leader development, mentoring, teaching. So I still do clinical care. I work part-time at night in a few different hospitals in the ICU because, I realized the bits that I loved over 20 years, right, was in the trenches with the nurses.
Right.
Sick patient, waking up at 3 a.m. All right, now I at least know that you woke me up for a good reason. If I'm a critical care doc and you're bothering me. But there was a piece missing, and that was, the whole developing a protege and kind of watching them go through their career, helping them avoid things that maybe I couldn't have avoided, or helping them avoid something that somebody helped me avoid. So I did executive coach training, and then it seemed to be a little bit of a hole for me there because most of my struggles and challenges when I was active duty, particularly as a leader, had to do with that over compartmentalizing, right? Thinking, okay, well, this is good in my personal life, so why is this same, kind of domain at work not working for me? Or right. I'm great at this at work. Why can't I apply that kind of credibility and skill to my personal life? And, the light bulb goes on, and you're the same you in both places. So the likelihood that it's some other answer besides you is pretty low. So I pursued positive psychology training as a coach, figuring if somebody had a challenge in executive skills, leadership mentality, communication, feedback, those kind of hard skills in the workplace, I could help them through that sort of thing, time management, the usual menu. But if they were having a relationship problem or, kind of a crisis with their values or principles or how, their own personal development aligned with what they were doing at work, I wanted to be prepared for that as well. It seems like a little bit of an odd niche, but I've run into some folks that have done the same, dual training, and they're like, yeah, it's good to be able to help folks in both sides.
No, I think it makes sense because even I can look back and say, easily say, like, I probably almost felt like I led two different lives at some points in my military career where, I was super
100%.
successful at home at work, and it was like night and day. At home, it was completely different, or just felt like a different person. Even though you're right, what's the one X factor is you, and
Yeah.
it's definitely an interesting dynamic and kind of interesting thing to think about. And then looking back on it, yeah, definitely interesting to see how, and especially in the military world, you get so many different stressors and different things, and maybe some other folks do, and for the personal life in there too, and it's definitely not easy every time.
Right. Right. And then, the idea of, looking back at what you enjoyed, like the joke when I retired, like, what are you going to do now? You're going to, you're going to join an academic
Right.
institution. You're going to join a private practice. And I said, I'm going to build Legos for a while, guys.
Yeah.
Like, you get to the end of 20 years and look back and just like, I'm looking forward to, and I told the family, I said, look, we got to do one more move. We got a little surprise move at the end of the career. One more move. And then we'll be set with, pension and healthcare and all of that. And then dad becomes self-loading baggage. So wherever we want to move, kids, wife decide, dad just says yes. They decided they wanted to stay out here in the Pacific Northwest, the last place that we moved. But, looking forward to being dad and
Right.
being husband, and, my joke with the wife, and I'm like, yeah, we don't have a pool, so I can't be the pool boy, but I can be the hot tub boy. And just, take care of, take care of the home front, which, I had relied on the whole family to take care of for, the better part of my life, to be perfectly honest. And, looking back at the pieces that, as you get back into the workplace and you're like, okay, I now get to choose, right? Our choice muscle, it kind of goes to some of the transition from the military that you mentioned. Our choice muscle is completely atrophic, right? For 2 decades, and even, as you go up with your officer ranks, you get, some pseudo choice sometimes. Here's this terrible choice. Here's that terrible choice. Pick them. Like, wait, is there a third one? No, I gave you choice, like, telling your kid, okay, the side dish is going to be broccoli or carrots. And they say, what about Snickers or Twinkies? And no, that's not a choice. But I gave you a choice, so be happy. We're just not any good at it because we haven't done it. And the put myself and put my family first muscle is also pretty atrophic. So I got into a position where I said, well, now that I'm out, I get to, slowly build those muscles back. And, there's a principle in positive psychology called job crafting, right? You're like, oh, I didn't know that was a formal process, but it is. If you can actually make your own path forward and pick the things that you like, and if you don't have to do the things that you don't like, then don't. Again, a completely foreign concept for, lifelong military members, but, being able to look back and say, coaching, I didn't call it coaching then, we called it leader development. And it was an extra duty as a sign, right? There was just an expectation that you were going to have a junior officer, you were going to have an NCO attached to you, you were going to be responsible for some of their professional development. And I look back and I'm like, I actually missed that. How do I pull that into my job crafting when I just want to be a part-time clinician and not do hospital committee and write policies and answer emails? Oh, I'll start my own business doing that. And again, another thing that's completely foreign to most military members, although a lot of folks, as they transition out, end up as entrepreneurs.
Right.
I'd be interested to hear your because I know you did as well. Is it you know what, I had no control, now I'm going to put myself in a position where I have total control? Or what was the motivation for you?
I think that was part of it. I have 3 things going on. Like my antique business, I started before I retired, probably like 5 years before I retired, on a kind of small basis, thinking that like maybe that would be the full-time transition and that's it. Obviously it didn't work out that way, but it's funny. I think had I not left I retired out of here in DC, went to Maine for a year, which was always the plan to be close to family. Had I not done that, I probably would have fell into the standard government contractor, government employee thing here, which it's not a bad thing, but I knew when I retired, I did not want to go back to the windowless office daily doing that, right? Like it just wasn't my thing unless, there could have been some financial incentives to do that. There was, but it's not all about the money, I guess. And I think had I not gone to Maine though, which completely removed me from that being an option, and then realizing like, okay, kind of like you said, like there's these other things I want to do, and there's these other things that I can do and make my own. We're just going to do that for now and see what happens. And and that's kind of the same way where I got here. And like you said, there's some control. And I like how my wife put it. She said, you seem way less stressed than you were when you were in the Navy. However, you have a lot more on your plate now, I feel like, than you did before. Because kind of like you said before, you got your taskings, you got your duties. It's all kind of cut and dry. Now when you're doing your own thing, you can set your own schedule, you can do all this, but unless you have employees helping you, you're pretty much running the show, and having to do everything. So it can be a lot more. But yeah, I think part of it was the control, and part of it was, I just want to, I mean, we don't have kids at this point, but I think that spending time with the family, doing this, having control of your own schedule was big for me. Just do my own thing at some point, So
yeah, it's funny you mentioned being busier. Despite having more control, because then you're looking at, so wait, I'm choosing that.
I know, right?
My daughter is, she's 16 going on 37. We were at and actually funny, the first thing that I did officially as a civilian, retired, 31 July, they always make it the end of the month. And, 1st of August, she and I drove up to a acoustic blues workshop,
cool.
A week-long camp. And I found it in May, and I said, hey, you want to go to blues camp with me? So she's looking at the website with me, and she's, 13, 14 at the time. And beautiful. It's actually on an old Army post, Fort Warden. That was part of the Pacific. Yeah, so Navy guy, you're probably familiar with all of the shenanigans around here with the water. So they've turned it into a state park.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
They host probably 13, I think, different artist retreats and camps. They have a writing camp. They have a few different music camps. They do artist in residencies, things there. So I found this on the website. I'm like, wow, I haven't been able to connect with, guitar playing and music the same way that I did. I had a band in medical school, and anybody that played guitar did. And then real life intruded. I said, all right, well, that's definitely something I want to reinvigorate. So we go to blues camp for a week, and then we've just done it every summer since. And at this last one, one of the things that I did when I got out, I did now that I think about it, I did acquire a big boy job. I had a research grant that a colleague and I had submitted and resubmitted, and I think we were on our third revision and submission, and then it finally got funded. So the problem was with the funding cycle and the whole length of it, it was going to get funded 2 months after I became a civilian, and he switched into the reserves. And we're like, it's supposed to have been 2 active duty principal investigators working together on this technology project. So the way medical research works in the service is they have contract organizations that handle research money for you. Because if it goes to your commander, now it's commander's discretion. He doesn't have to do anything with it. It's just in his budget. So for Congress to designate money for research and have an active duty researcher be involved, you have these third-party organizations that work. So I asked the JAG Corps, I'm like, hey, can I apply for a position to work on this grant that I got when I was active duty as a civilian? And they said, are you doing it before you end, all your terminal leave and your official date? I said, no, I'm going to do it. I'll apply afterwards. Is it an open competition amongst, anybody can apply for this job and get it? I said, yes, they're just going to advertise it on the interwebs, and then whoever applies, apply. They said, you're going to be a civilian, and that's an open competition. We don't care what you do. You're no longer our problem. Okay. Because, like you said, with government contracting rules, sometimes there's a 6-month waiting period, and there's all these hoops for that transition if you don't want to leave completely and you want to stay attached. Well, I got the job as a principal investigator on my grant, and worked the research with somebody that I had mentored as a researcher when we were active duty. That sort of continued afterwards. And again, now that I think back on it, I didn't do formal executive coach training or any mentor training until like probably a year and a half into that. But as I look back on it, I'm like, okay, clearly I took on that as a job and as an activity because I wanted to keep mentoring and working with this guy.
Right.
As a mentor tip, if you're going to mentor anybody, find somebody brilliant. Your goal as a mentor is that your protege should surpass you. If you pick your proteges
Exactly.
right, they'll knock it out of the park, and then you just like, this is such a joy to work with, right? One of these high flyers, and then if you have any impact on them at all, that's positive. Just call it a win. But most of the time, you just have to wind them up and point them in the right direction,
Yep.
and they go. So that grant finally got to the end of its rope. We extended to finish some of the deliverables, and then I was at Blues Camp with my daughter, and I got an email from one of their HR people. And the grant is actually winding up officially. What is it? It's almost end of September now.
Right.
It's basically like the no cost extension is done in about a week, and this was August, so they had said, "Oh, we're going to need you to do your annual report." I'm like, what? Oh, we changed the evaluation system this year. You have to write your own annual evaluation.
Back to normal. No.
I'm like, yeah, no. And again, the ability to say no is another atrophic muscle, I think, before you transition out of the military. And I said, no. I said, let me just save us all the trouble. I'm on a no-cost extension, so I'm not getting paid. And I mean, this whole project is winding up in less than 6 weeks.
Yeah, why would you do it? Yeah.
Yeah, like, well, we understand, Dr. Colombo, but we're just going to need you to go ahead and do it because it's a best practice in HR, and this is just the way it is now. As long as you're an employee, we just have to get this done. And I said, well, allow me to fix the glitch. This is not sitting at breakfast, typing out an email on my phone. This is notice of my immediate resignation. I'll remain available to the other principal investigator and our research coordinator for any questions to ease the transition. Send. I get an immediate text from my research coordinator like, sorry, that wasn't how that was supposed to go down. And I said, it's fine. I said, it's almost like this needed to happen. So I put my phone down. I looked at my daughter and I said, I just quit my job. Right. And like you said, you're busier. And she goes, good. You should quit more of them. You suck at being retired, Dad.
Oh, wow. That's
okay. That's good. So, but yeah, it's funny. We now have the choice to be able to do things. It's not like we suddenly choose nothing, right? Which exactly. I think is one of the fears of, if somebody doesn't tell me what to do, am I going to have, the work ethic or the desire to take on all of these things, get out of bed and go do them?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, sure. If you pick the things, you're much more likely to want to get up. Matter of fact, you're probably more prone to, self-overload.
Oh, for sure.
Than underdoing it. I mean, I don't know if that was your experience at active duty as well, was you would probably overload, not because they over-assigned you things, but you insisted on keeping things that you didn't have to do, but that you desperately wanted to. You just couldn't make any of the have-tos go away in exchange.
Yeah, I think it's it's interesting too from my experience. I feel like, and maybe I don't know if mine was as normal as others, but I think for the military in a whole, like, you get in these tunnels of like, the military's not. I mean, I don't ever think the military was my life. Like some people, it is, right? Like completely their life. It all encompassing. But for a lot of people, it is, and I think after the fact, it doesn't change, right? People stay in that mindset. And I think one thing I realized quickly after I retired was all these doors open that I never would have like seen or had access to, probably had I stayed in longer, and at no fault of their own. It just things I never would have had the chance to see them or do them or see these people or meet these people, especially with this, nonprofit thing I'm working on. Like it's been an absurd journey over the last couple of years since I retired that I just did not expect. And I would say, for people listening out there, that maybe are concerned about that or worried about retirement or worried about getting out, like there definitely is stuff on the other side that you just don't expect. And it's been interesting. So
Yeah, and I think it's funny. I heard a podcast many years ago. I think I want to say it was a Tim Ferriss. Derek Silvers, I think, was who it was, the guy who founded CD Baby. And one of the things I took away from that was he said that at the beginning of a career or an endeavor or a process, the goal is to say yes to everything. And you're eventually hoping to get enough optionality, enough skill, enough, desirability, enough demand on your services or expertise that then you say no to everything except the things that you say hell yes to.
right.
And as I was laughing, because I was active duty when I listened to that, I'm like, wouldn't it be great if that were an option to say no to anything? And I get out, and I mean, that's a great mindset to have when you're starting your business or starting your nonprofit or starting your new career is, okay, I'm a beginner again. Like I mean, I'm a critical care physician with deployed experience and a full professor at Uniformed Services University. I mean, there's a lot of my career aspirations in terms of being a doctor that I'm, there isn't much more place to go, right? Without being super specialized and really going away from the clinical bit that I really love and the teaching bit that I love. Great. I don't know anything about business when I got out.
Right. Yeah.
Literally nothing. And I was like, I have not been a beginner. Like even the thing that I wanted to get back to, I want to get back to guitar. I've been playing since I was 14. I'm not a beginner. I'm just way out of practice.
Right.
Business, complete beginner. Right. So how do you keep the lights on? Say yes to everything. Right. And then hopefully you get good enough at the business or the nonprofit or whatever it is that you're developing that then you do get to the point where you're like, all right, now I get to say no or hell yes. And I can really put all that energy into the things I'm really excited about.
Yeah. And I think a good point there too, like you said, is you don't have to go at it alone. I mean, a lot of this, and probably with yours, you've done a lot of it yourself too. But at the same time, you've had mentors. I've had mentors here on the outside that I've been lucky enough to be able to reach out to and be like, hey, am I doing this right? Am I doing this wrong? And it's kind of funny. In fact, I was getting my yearly eye exam last week, talking to the doctor, and she's telling me about her and her brother's nonprofit mission, like this international mission that they do overseas. And she said, the problem we're running into is neither of us know how to set it up legally here in the United States. I said, look, here's my card. Like, I've done it all myself. Because they were going to hire a lawyer. I'm like, you can hire a lawyer. You can hire a professional. That's fine. I was like, I am not a professional at this, but I've done it 3 or 4 times now. It isn't as hard and daunting as it looks. And it can be done by yourself, and so it's just kind of funny that, that stuff arises. But yeah, it was just kind of a funny story when, she was having those problems. So
yeah. Of all of the connections that she was going to make that day to help solve that problem. Right.
Yep. So I was like, I just went through it in Virginia and it was way harder than I thought it was going to be. So I was like, I can easily walk you through that one if you need to. So
nice.
Something I've always been interested in. So I've done a couple of public speaking things at 2 risk management, medical professional risk management symposiums, whatever you'd want to call them, particularly geared toward ER professionals, doctors, nurses, everybody else. And I found it interesting. I kind of fell into it. My aunt was a risk professional. She was a nurse and then a risk, switched over risk management for the second half of her career. And I just found that interesting because it kind of tied into my aviation background with human factors and things like that. And then it further tied into the nonprofit with the mental health stuff. And both of those, both things where I spoke at, I sat in a bunch of the different events, and I found it very interesting, the mental health side of the ER, and what is happening, what isn't happening. I mean, maybe, and from me being a layman and being outside that community, thinking what would happen, but then realizing, hey, this is pretty much like the military, and a lot of it isn't happening, from the people from professionals like yourself getting help, and I was just curious about your opinion on that, from the critical care side, like critical sick care, mental health, these ER professionals going through I can't imagine the people in Baltimore going through shootings every night or something, and then did they ever get help? It's kind of an interesting dynamic to think about. So
Yeah, it's I first encountered this really from the graduate medical education side as an associate program director and a program director, and a faculty, teaching residents. And the it's being a physician has never been an easy profession.
Right.
There's a movie, I think, from our childhood, like the 80s, that the dean of the medical school tells everybody as they're sitting down for their first lecture, oh, by the way, you just joined a profession that has the highest rate of substance abuse, divorce, suicide. There was one
Right.
I'm like, there needed to be another one, even those three weren't scarring enough. And that was, a movie 45, 50 years ago based on data from this late 60s, early 70s, right? There's like one mental health study of
Right.
survey of physicians at the time. And, dentists, same. Healthcare is not an easy gig. It never has been.
No.
What's different now that not everyone, that's an overstatement, but that so many more folks are reporting burnout, reporting, mental health diagnoses, mental health crises, mental health issues. Is it that we're fortunately a bit more permissive a culture in admitting these things and it not
Right.
having a huge stigma, although we're delusional if we think there's no stigma
Right.
in the professional world or in the military world. Oh, we've removed the stigma.
The stigma's gone. Yeah. No.
Yeah. No, it isn't. No, it isn't. And we would be lying to say that it is. Is it better? Sure. Is it good? No. And those are two different things. What is the, and I absolutely hate the word burnout, although I use it professionally. I've done research on it, and it drives me crazy because it's a symptom, right? If you showed up and, to a doctor's office with a list of complaints, then we would, as a physician, be like, okay, let me get down to what the cause of that is. They wouldn't just, name the syndrome and be like, and you're done.
Right.
They could, if there's no treatment for it, no identifying it, they would still give you symptomatic relief. But unfortunately, with burnout in most health systems, we stop there, right? And becomes a one size fits all. Oh, well, they're just tired and stressed. They need massage chairs in the physician's lounge and, yoga mats and, okay, yeah, I like a massage, and, yoga is good for my old bones, but that's not, 100% of burnout symptoms amongst healthcare providers is not a result of lack of massage and lack of flexibility.
It might give a 5-10 minute respite, right, or something, and then right back in. Yeah.
Right, exactly. And again, if you're talking about a profession where you talk about ER and critical care, you mentioned the folks in Baltimore at shock trauma, throw in trauma surgery, right? Just to have a very stark example to folks. And it's not that primary care doesn't have their share of, stressful horror stories with patients or with colleagues and all the rest of it. But, we'll use the Steelman example of here are, 3 areas of medicine where any observer would look and go, how are those people putting up with that? Right. You show up and you relieve a colleague for a 12-hour shift. And I'm going to go do some nights this weekend. Right. You show up at 7:00 at night to get sign out, and you walk into a room and, there's a patient in cardiac arrest and the whole team's working on them and they don't make it.
Right.
Right. So now your colleague has just witnessed the death of a patient. You have no idea what you're walking into. Was it somebody they took care of? Was it somebody that had been on a clinic panel that they then admitted? Did any of the nurses stay late? Did any of the nurses that showed up at shift change, that was the beginning of their shift? Like, welcome, first 5 minutes, this is going to happen. You still have to work the next 11 hours and 55 minutes.
Right.
Right. You need to, do you talk your colleague down? Do you ask them if they're okay? Or is the best thing to just take sign out so that you can, assume patient care for their panel and their census and get them the hell out of there so they can go to what you hope is their support system.
Right.
And then that begs the question, wait, do they have one?
Where are they going?
And what is it? Where are they going?
Yeah.
And that's, I joke that if I have a week or 4 days in the unit where I don't have a death, that's an anomaly.
Right.
Right. That's an expectation. And I don't work at the busiest hospital on earth. It's by no means light. But I have colleagues that work at far busier hospitals where they get that down to, if I don't have a death on a shift, then that's an anomaly, right?
Right.
ER, same, right? And ER will even, I mean, I'm an adult intensivist. ER will get adults, young and old, children,
Right.
pregnant women, right? The whole gamut of the human experience may die in your ER sometime on your shift.
Right.
Okay. When we consider that part of the normal, right, that's decidedly abnormal. I had this joke with my mother. She asked me in medical school, she's like, "You never talk to me about work when you call home." I'm like, "Ma." I'm like, let me put it to you this way. I was on my obstetrics rotation. It was at Portsmouth Naval Hospital. By the military medical students, we loved going to Portsmouth for our rotations when we were in Norfolk.
Why is
It
that?
was a military hospital. They would let you do
Yeah,
stuff,
I guess, yeah.
right?
Oh, okay.
So
Yeah.
I caught like 12 babies in 6 weeks as a third year med student, right? Well, one Saturday I'm watching, the ball game with this patient and her husband while I'm birthing their child. Okay, so you have your hands, which not in a usually socially acceptable location, on your
Right.
female patient with her husband in the room, and you're watching the Cubs game over your shoulder, telling her to push, and you get pooped on, peed on, and bled on by her and this brand new stranger that just came into the world, and you're the first face that they saw.
Right.
And that's just like the first hour of your Saturday on a 24-hour call. And it suddenly occurred to me after that experience, I'm like, wait, I get it. Doctors are not sane, right? We describe that as part of a normal day. Nobody else on earth, no other profession would say that what I just did for the last hour is any shade of normal. Like, I get it. This is going to be a very strange life that I've chosen because this is part of my normal, right? So I think that's really the first understanding is what we're still humans, right? Our brain evolution culture really hasn't adapted, right? To, okay, well, you're a doctor, you're different. Same human protoplasm. Yeah, I went to some extra college, but that really didn't change my brain chemistry substantially. It's still not a normal experience that you show up at work and somebody dies.
Right.
And then cross them off the list. We got to go take care of the other 23 patients that I have that might die unless we do the right things for them for 12 hours. And then you go home and you sleep and you go back that night for the next shift. I mean, it's really the first understanding is you're not dealing with a normal set of human stressors. And I think the military is another analog where life is just not normal.
Yeah, for sure.
Right. Well, you guys just train all day and go to the gym. Okay. There's a lot of training. There's a lot of gym stuff for your infantry guys and your sailors that are part of, combat vessels. But stop and think, what are they training for? You're making war part of their normal.
Right. Exactly. And then look back at, at least for us in our age group now, and, I came in before 9/11 and I remember there was no war. And then for the majority of our careers, there was, you know what I mean? And not normal. So.
No. I mean, 1998, I don't know, it was when I took my oath in my parents' backyard. The recruiter showed up. He brought a flag. We had, family there for a barbecue. It was a thing. There was no war. It was 1998, right? And then I'm in medical school, go to some training. And I remember being in clinic at Eisenhower Army Medical Center in Georgia on a family medicine rotation. And I was seeing clinic with this major. And I said, "Hey, sir, the NCO just grabbed me. You want to come watch this on TV?" And, something a plane had crashed into one of the World Trade Center towers. And we're all watching. We're like, man, what was the pilot thinking? Was it mechanical error? Was it this and that and the other thing? And of course, in the back of your mind, you're like, that could be terrorism. But,
right.
We watched live on TV the second plane go into the towers.
Yeah, same here. Yep.
And I was a second lieutenant and on my summer rotation, I'm like,
uh-oh.
Now I know it's not, an accident. Yeah. That's right. My attending, who had, been in for a million years and had been in Gulf One, and he just slaps me on the shoulder and goes, "We're going to war, son. Let's go finish clinic." And just marches right back in the next patient's room. And I'm like, huh? Oh, that's what I signed up for to pay for medical school. And that's, I
Right.
mean, his response is totally expected, right? For
Right.
a
Exactly. Yep.
mid-career major in the medical corps that had been deployed previously, he immediately assessed what happened on the screen, knew what the foreign policy response was going to be, and then it's kind of like, yeah, man, we got to finish clinic before, so we can make sure we get lunch before afternoon clinic. Let's go.
Right. Exactly.
Right? Okay. So you have these communities of people who are expected as part of normal to endure stress and continue to
Right.
perform under those stresses because that's the requirement of the job, right? The joke amongst a lot of my superior officers when in the 90s, a lot of things that were not congruent with a wartime force, like, basic trainees busting out stress cards in
Right.
basic,
Exactly. Yeah.
hey, time out. So,
Yeah.
right. And anybody that had been in a war, right, that stayed, everybody else got out, right? Everybody else was like, well, you can't say time out to the enemy.
Right.
Right. We're not, and it wasn't just, okay, obviously for some guys, it's like, it's just got to be hard because it was hard on me.
Right.
Other
Exactly.
people like took a step back and they're like, wait, this isn't just to be cruel to our basic trainees, but we have to prepare them appropriately for what they're
going to
they're
face.
going to endure and then what they're going to face, or else we're doing them a disservice and, the country and the fighting force a disservice. I mean, it's the same thing in medicine, right? If you don't train under a bit of stress and a bit of fatigue and a bit of sleep deprivation, you're not being true to what the job is going to require.
Right. And then what happens when crap hits the fan? Yeah.
Correct.
So,
When it really happened, my internship class, we did not have any work hours regulations. My second year back, the work hours started, but it was the first year, so they sort of like winked at them.
right.
And then as it went on, they started to implement them more seriously and more strictly. And there's an obvious benefit to that. I mean, I had shifts, and this is no exaggeration. I would start at say 5 a.m. on a Wednesday and go straight through overnight, admitting new patients, seeing clinic the next day. And then, because somebody had a problem with their schedule, we had a different attending cover us for that week, and they hadn't canceled his clinic, so he couldn't start rounding with us on those new patients that we admitted and disposition anybody until 5 o'clock the next day. So 36 hours, then you start the intellectual exercise of explaining to your attending who doesn't know any of these patients what the story is so that you can decide, I'm keeping them, I'm sending them, and I have to do this. I fell asleep in mid-sentence. Right? I'm literally presenting a patient and I nod off, and he next thing I know, he's like rubbing my shoulder, dude, wake up.
Yeah. Where am I? Yeah.
What happened, sir? What day is it? And it seems nostalgic and kind of funny to tell the story, 25 years later, but I mean, that's an extreme.
Right.
Because there's no thought process behind, let's make this training as stressful as we can. No, let's make it as stressful as it needs to be.
As it needs to be, yeah.
Right? And the problem is the pendulum swung the other way, which is, well, we should be able to do training without stress because stress is bad and we don't want to stress people out. I mean, there's obviously a concept called eustress, right? Where you're somewhere between no stress and distress. It's an appropriate amount of, right, like emotional engagement and focus on the task because of the circumstances that it applies. And that is going to be a higher level for soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, for doctors, nurses, and healthcare professionals. And that's reality. You can't do medical care without it. You can't do war without it. Right. However, that reality carries with it consequences. And I think one of the questions, getting back to, long story longer, Colombo, your focus on mental health, what are those consequences and how do we do right by, those folks in order to keep them healthy in honor of the sacrifice that they made for those professions, because we need those, right? Somebody has to do that job. Somebody has to do it well. And I think the way to honor that sacrifice is, okay, we've got your back afterwards. And that's one of the things that rubs me the wrong way about the stigma, right? Because what is that all about? Are you expecting folks to be, capable of withstanding all of this with no break, with no
outlet, nothing. Right. Yeah.
right? It's silly on its face to expect that. And I saw this in you mentioned the ER. I saw this in a graduate medical education conference. They had a breakout session on burnout. They were going to have this expert panel discuss burnout. And the example they used, there's this famous photo. I mean, I guess it was famous in my circles. I don't know if the rest of the world considers it famous. Of this emergency medicine doc, outside the hospital, kind of in the alley.
I know the one. Yeah.
Kneeling down, he's got his stethoscope like this, and he's just like he's squatting, and he's got his white coat on, and it's clear he's having a moment.
Right.
All right. Somebody snaps this picture of him, and they put that up, right? And I have truth telling disorder. It got me in some trouble, affected my career, which is a story for another time. But I got up to the microphone and I said, I don't know that we're going in the right direction. Like I said, we're asking the wrong question about that photo. The question isn't, wow, that guy had a breakdown or almost breakdown in the middle. I said, anybody that's practiced long enough and is stressed is only because they're awake and that they know what they're doing.
Right.
You acknowledge, we all have those moments. Everyone has those moments. My question is, why did the person who witnessed said moment bust out their cell phone, take a picture of it, and post it for the world to see, instead of letting that person have their private moment and then going to them and asking them if they needed something?
Yeah,
what was the imperative to record well, it had a positive impact on this. I said, you're missing the point. I'm not really interested in that specific act. I'm interested in the culture that would think that that's a normal response.
Right.
Right. Obviously, it had a positive impact. It brought a lot of attention to burnout, et cetera. But the culture never asked the question that I asked at that meeting, and they thought I was, the crank. And I said, y'all are making it seem like it's possible to not have any stress or not be sad about these things or to be a doctor and be happy. And the movie, one of the Pixar, Inside Out, I think, where it was preteen young lady.
Oh, right. Yeah.
The emotions are the animated characters.
The emotions, yeah.
Right. And I said, if anybody in this room has seen the movie Inside Out, he said, even my children, I think were at the time like 8 and 10. I said, they understand that a univariate emotional response is not a human experience. We all simultaneously experience joy, fear, anger, sadness about the same exact event. That was the point of the movie. It wasn't just, this kid gets to be joyful all the time. Joy is always driving. It's like you're not a human if you're not able to simultaneously, right? I mean, I think of the greatest experiences I've ever had, right? I just wrote about this in a blog post that I haven't published yet, but there's only 2 things in my life that I've ever felt different about on the other side, right? I mean, most of the time I felt like the smart ass adolescent that I think I've always been. Like, my wife and I talked about this. I'm like, we got married. Did you feel any different when we woke up the next morning? She's like, not really. We'd kind of been acting like a married couple since
right, exactly.
2 weeks into dating, and we were just sort of boring like that. I said, yeah. I said, I felt the same way. I mean, we were, when we had kids, right? The second that my son hit the atmosphere and I realized, oh my God, we just made another person. Right. And we are 100% responsible for everything in this new human's life for the foreseeable future. Okay. I felt very different 5 seconds after I met my son before he was born. And going to war. Okay. That experience has changed me profoundly and significantly forever. And I came home very different than when I left. But to describe my experience in war as all bad or my experience as a parent as all good would be crazy. Right? It's funny, my daughter has gotten into watching reruns of MASH. Which is interesting for me because now, medical research in the military has changed from, these near peer or from these, urban conflicts and having air supremacy to, large scale combat operations and near peer adversaries. And it's going to look a lot more like, Korea, World War II than it's going to look like what our experience was for 20 years. So as I'm watching this, I'm laughing in one way. She's like, "What are you laughing?" I said, "Well, everybody's talking about what's the medical environment going to look like?" I'm like, "I don't know. Turn on Alan Alda." Right? They're showing it to us. And I read the book MASH, and I'm just like, this is amazing. It sounds, and a good friend of mine is she's the head of the Joint Trauma System. The last military health system research symposium, part of her plenary talk, she actually put up a clip from MASH explaining, right, damage control resuscitation surgery on a sitcom when everybody's publishing about it when we were in service. It's like, oh, this is a great discovery. It's a great rediscovery, not a great discovery. But the experience of those characters, they're in the most hellish experience that human beings endure. I'll just say that about war. I don't know if anybody's going to come up with one that's worse as a collective.
Yeah, I don't think
right?
so. I don't know.
I don't think so. It's pretty bad. Even if you come up with a worse one, okay, fine. It's still top 3. Some of the friendships that I made and some of the experiences I had were the most positive and the most lasting that I've ever had in my life.
Same here.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. Is war good or is war bad? You need to be more specific, right? Yeah, war is horrible and no one should ever have to go through it. But some of the greatest and most happy and positive things I've ever had happen to me are a direct result of me participating in one.
Exactly. Same here. Yeah.
And
Weird
being
concept,
a father, yeah, but it's baffling, right? And being a father is the greatest joy I've ever known. And I thought, all right, my daughter's going to be born. I got this. I'm a dad. No, you add girl dad to your bio. Get ready for the next reset. I'm like, holy crap! Not only am I responsible for another human, I have a daughter. That's just a completely different mindset as a dad. Okay, they are the greatest thing that I've ever done. My wife and I love each other, and marriage is the second greatest thing we've ever done, because we both would say that having kids is the pinnacle for us. Those two humans cause me the greatest fear and the greatest worry and the most negative feelings that a human being can have, because my daughter got her driver's license like a week and a half ago, and she started full-time college as a high school junior, right? She's driving across the bridge in Tacoma and going to community college. My kid gets in a car and goes across the bridge on the expressway and I'm like, every day you're going to do this? Yeah.
Twice a day. Yeah.
Yeah. You taught me to drive, Dad. I'm like, I know I did. And that was the dad thing. And I'm glad I had the time as a retiree to just sit in the car and tell you how to parallel park. And now I get it, right? So one of those things where you're going to call your own parents and be like, yeah, for all of the worry and angst and the best part is that my mother in her 80s would say, you still do. You and your brothers, I still worry about you guys every day. I'm like, Ma, we're like, I'm almost 50. My brother's almost 60 and the oldest.
My mother's the same. Yeah.
Right? I'm like, we've given you grandchildren. Doesn't matter. You're still my kids. Right. So the complexity of those experiences, right, was just something that because I had experienced, I was in this conference listening to people try to say that the ideal was going to be to have some uniform positive emotion about being a physician on call.
Right.
I'm like, you're pursuing the wrong goal, because it's impossible. It's not about, making the experiences that we have in the military or in medicine, or, in my case, military medicine, which is its own kettle of fish, right? You're going to make those uniformly positive? No, you're not. Okay, let's get a grip on reality and understand that you are going to be responding to, preventing, and managing the inevitable results of those experiences in terms of emotional and mental stress, behavioral health disorder. Just accept it.
Right.
As a program director, right? So I had a lot of residents who ended up in therapy, and because I looked for it, right? I didn't look for it in myself, which is, again, part of another story, but right. I was on the hunt for it because I knew that it was inevitable, and I asked. And because I did those two things, it's amazing what you find when you go looking for it.
It is.
Right. So somebody asked me once, and I said that, you find that your residents need mental health support, formal therapy, diagnosis, medicine, treatment, et cetera. I said, oh yeah, probably about 40% prevalence rate. And they said, what? I'm like, why are you asking? Well, I just had my first resident, come into my office and say that they were struggling, they weren't making it in training, and we talked about why, and we referred them to mental health services, and now they're getting treatment.
And they're probably a better resident because of it, right?
100%, right? And they're like, I'm just wondering, is that the tip of the iceberg? I'm like, 100%,
right?
100%, right? I'm like, I'm at about a 40% prevalence, and I later in again, the stigma exists. I actually, in an investigation of my leadership climate for a variety of other reasons, one of the comments when I was, reviewing all of these witness statements, when they were interviewing everybody that worked with me, for me, on top of me,
right?
He's weird. He really seems to be hyper focused on mental health, and I don't know, what that's all about. It was actually a comment from one of the people that I worked with in a leadership position. I'm like, that's somehow being turned as a bad thing in my investigation.
Right.
Right. I'm like, how could you be hyper focused on something that's just is a real thing? And I mean, I had a resident who, hey, what's going on, man? Well, apart from my wife, because they were in two different training programs, we thought we could handle it, but XYZ, and I'm not sleeping, I'm not eating, I'm this. And I said, okay, well, because I noticed that you're not focused when you're taking care of your patients. You're not focused when we're rounding or teaching. And he's like, really? You noticed? I'm like, and I'm not the only one.
Right? Exactly.
Got it. And I had a deal with the chief of psychiatry. I just knocked on his door. I said, dude, I'm going to be sending you a steady stream of human beings that need help. I'm their leadership. I don't want to be a part of any of that because they need their privacy and I need my role and they got to be separate. I said, so how do we do this? He said, too easy. Send me an email, CC them on it, and remind me to take you off, and I'll handle it from there. That's all I need from you. Right? We called it the behavioral health drug deal. And I told the other program directors in the building, I'm like, just talk to Chris. He's good about this. They go, what do you mean? I said, send him an email that says, so-and-so and I have talked, and I think they would benefit from meeting with you and discussing services. Leave me out of the rest. And he would write back, got it, and then take it from there. Right? It was just another guy in the system who recognized there's no way anybody's getting through internal medicine training for 3 years after medical school and in the military to boot without a high chance of needing, the behavioral health tune-up or maintenance.
Right.
Right. Okay. You change the oil in your car, you rotate your tires. You know what? An acute stress reaction to what you do for a daily living, even if it doesn't turn into a major depressive disorder, you're an anomaly if you don't have one.
Right.
My
Exactly.
opinion.
Yeah.
Right. So, this same resident, right? I'm working with him again a few months later, and he had, leaps and bounds better. He felt better, all the rest of it. And then a few months later, I'm like, hey man, what's going on? What do you mean? You remind me of you 8 months ago. What's
right.
up? Well, I stopped my meds. And, the joke in internal medicine, right, is we would have patients that's, you'd ask them, do you have high cholesterol? Do you have high blood pressure? And they would say no. And then you would look at their medical record and be like, you're on a medication for high cholesterol and 6 medications for high blood pressure. Oh, yeah, but they're working, so I don't have it anymore. And it just stood right out that, I had an internist, a brilliant kid, by the way. I mean, just a protege I'm super proud of because, like I said, my fondest wish is they surpass me. It was not going to take this kid long to leave me in the dust.
But basically doing the same thing, right? Like,
right?
Oh, no,
feed and water him, right? And then you're like, you stopped your meds. Why? Because you didn't have major depressive disorder anymore. Did you talk to your psychiatrist? No, I stopped going to therapy. Come on, get in the elevator.
Let's go.
What do you mean?
Yeah.
I said, I'm walking you upstairs right now. You look, I'm like, am I overreacting that you look terrible, or do you feel as bad as I think you look? And he broke down. I took him in the office and, got him calmed down. And I did take him upstairs. And I'm like, because I asked, because I knew. right? And again, it even happened to me. You go long enough, and I finally was funny. It was somebody who I had trained, who was a family medicine resident, and then became a staff, and then came out to Madigan, and he was my primary care doc. I said, "Hey, you got room on your panel? Because I trust you. I know you a long time." And then I showed up, and the family medicine department at Madigan, they just instituted a depression screening for everybody.
Oh, wow.
If you showed up for an appointment, right? The nurse would do intake and, take blood pressure and do vital signs and weigh you. And then they would say, "How are you feeling lately?" Right? Any issues with your mood? And that was just part of their screening questions. And if you said yes to any of their 2 or 3 really kind of broad, open-ended questions that could relate to depression, they just handed you a laminated copy of a standardized depression screening instrument and a Sharpie. Go ahead and write this down. I'm going to erase it when you're done, but I'm going to put it in so the doc knows what's going on. Boom, boom, boom. Put it in. And as you're circling the answers to these questions, I'm an internist, right? So obviously I have the cheat code on this. I looked and I went, wow. It's amazing the things that you minimize when you look at them one at a time, but somebody presents you an instrument that's there to screen for it.
Right.
And there it is. And then I say to the resident, well, my doc now, I'm attending. I said, what do you recommend? He said, "I'm going to start you on meds. And do you have somebody that you talk to?" I said, "Yeah, I got an informal relationship with a psychiatrist." He goes, "Go ahead and make that a little more formal then."
Right.
And talk to them regularly. I said, "Okay, I got you." I said, "When do you recommend starting meds?" He's like, he said, "Sir, by the time someone like you actually gets to clinic, admits it out loud, and is willing to ask that question, you probably should have been on treatment." He said, "I'm guessing a year and a half ago."
Yeah.
And you stop and you think, I'm like, you're pretty good at this. Okay. And you just kind of put yourself in somebody's hands finally, and you say, okay, this has been going on a lot longer.
The stigma pushed me from not touching any meds ever, and then I finally did the last, 5 years of my career. And like I tell everybody, it had zero effect on my career, but I look back now thinking, holy crap, how easier maybe would it have been had I intervened earlier, or done this earlier? Who knows? Like, I as successful as things were, I'm like, man, there was times that were so painful. I'm like, maybe this would have been smarter to do earlier,
Yeah, 100%. And that's my story. It did affect my career because it wasn't treated earlier, right? That leadership investigation was because of a very unprofessional episode of me losing my temper with folks. And right, emotional instability and anger management. Okay, for me, looking back on it, I'm like, that's 100% mood stabilization, right? Psychiatric and pharmacologic treatment for depression probably would have prevented all of that. So by the time I got to actually being treated, I'd already been taken off the promotion list for 06 and left at 05 for the rest of my career. I'm like, well, there's nothing they can do to me now.
Yeah.
Right? As long as I don't actually commit a crime, I'm making it to retirement, and there's nothing left. Okay, great. I can't do any damage to my career with the stigma that I haven't already done by not managing myself appropriately. I mean, there's
funny,
the wake
even,
up.
I got lucky that I had a support group, even though I didn't realize it at first. Like three really close friends born out of like our flying days and the war days, and I don't know if any of us really realized it, that we just bounce stuff off each other all the time, and we do now. Now it's completely different. Now that we're older and we realize what we were doing, But even now, kind of similar to what you were saying for yourself, I definitely had some severe anger problems in the early days, but looking back, it was really a symptom of my anxiety. And when I couldn't get control of something, the outlet was anger, right? And so there's still jokes now that people, be like, "Oh, the angry Josh is coming out." That was circa 2003. I am not that person anymore. But it's funny that it's that stuff still comes out in a kind of joking way, But it's like, I look back, I'm like, oh man, it took me a lot to not be that person anymore, and get help and eventually do meds too. And it's just interesting to look back on it. And I guess it's fine to joke about now, but like, I don't know.
Yeah, no, and it's I mean, obviously it was a profound, like, tangible impact on my career.
Right.
it is what it is now. I would rather
You look
be,
like you're in a good spot. Yeah.
yeah, I would rather be a retired '05 and well treated than an untreated, and what's interesting is, I think the reason it became a thing it was 2017, right? I mean, the difference in culture based on a new generation of folks joining the military versus what you're talking about in 2003. I wonder how many folks do have unmanaged behavioral health diagnoses, anxiety, depression, like other mood disorders, like you said, that result in, they manifest with different symptoms, obviously. And one of those, I think that's probably, going to be more common in the military is going to be anger management.
Yeah,
right.
For sure.
And unprofessional outbursts like that because you feel out of control. And what do you do to get in control? You yell at people like your drill sergeant yelled at you.
Yeah.
And, prior to having a generation that, was raised in the era of participation trophies and stress cards and basic training, everybody just thought of that as normal. It was tolerated. Right. It was, in some senses, it was rewarded, right? You could get things done if people were afraid of you. And that generation shifted under my feet.
For sure.
To 2017, nobody was putting up with that crap anymore.
No. Yeah.
Right. And I got in the crosshairs of it. And, it's funny. You go from, I was a mentor as the associate program director and made the mentorship program. And then I actually we had to restrict me to the number of mentees that I could have. Right. You can't do more than 4 because you just don't have time for them all. I said, great. And then I became program director. And of course that looked like, oh, you're playing favorites to those 4. I'm like, started mentoring them like a year ago. They got another year and a half left. Yeah. Right. I should really keep them out of a sense of professionalism. Right. That was another mark against me. And then, toxic leader investigation, moved. That was the late career move. And I get out to Madigan. And, thank God somebody vouched for me that knew me at my best and not just at my worst. And, winning Researcher of the Year. And there's a Research Mentor Cube award that they have. And I'm like, oh, wow. I went back to that role and I'm like, what was different about being a program director and what was different about being just a faculty who had all the same roles? Well, one, I was, and this is even before I sought treatment for any mental health issue. It was part of that job stress, right? Of the expectations that you're responsible for all of this and it's on you. And with that stress comes that need for control. And it's almost like how are we going to find out that someone is symptomatic with a mood disorder?
Right.
Well, let's put them under extreme stress and see how it works. Yeah. And the stress structure of a military where you're completely responsible for something was definitely something that crossed my threshold. And changing to a more research tack, it wasn't like I wasn't responsible for important things. I mean, I'm in the last 5 years of my career, 4 years, I think I managed $20 to $25 million of government research funding, right? Which is, you mishandle those kind of funds, you get to wear orange and break rocks.
You're in trouble.
Right? So it's not like I wasn't responsible for something that could have gone catastrophically wrong if I didn't keep on top of all of it.
Right.
But being out of that sort of a microscope official leadership position, and then, as the time went on, getting treatment, I think really makes a difference. But I wonder if that generational shift might have been something that helps folks, kind of take a look and say, the environment again that folks are in of what's normal in the military, that level of responsibility, that level of it's on you, and that need for control because of it is going to be the kind of thing that like I said, it's just part of the normal where you expect this level of stress to cause issues in humans. We're wired this way. This is just how it's going to go. And instead of that being a sign that someone needs help, it's not like we're punishing the behavioral health disorder. but we're ignoring that could be the reason, and we're punishing the behavior while we still have an environment where we can't admit that that's a thing, right? And that we should address that early and often. We'll just let it run its, oh, yeah, I guess we should have looked into that, right? I wish that somebody had, been more forceful with me about, you need to get this checked out.
Yeah, same here.
Right, stigma or not, I think the stigma would have done, less damage to my career than, untreated behavioral health disorder in the midst of that level of military stress and all the rest of it.
Yeah, I do. I do think there's some simplicity to some of this for us, like from the mental health thing side. Like back to 2003, right? When crap hit the fan for me and some of my PTSD events really happened, the response was when you come back was, hey, pat on the shoulder, keep going. Like, no, like, how are you doing? It was more of okay, fast forward to 2017 when I really started getting to this mental health stuff more and trying to change the culture at one of the commands I was at. And we took a simple tack to it of just let's be open about some of this stuff. I'll share my stories, other leaders will share their stories, and we'll see what happens. And people started self-reporting. People started asking, hey, will you take me over to the mental health, the clinic on base, things like that. And it changed from, that pat on the shoulder, keep going, to that pat on the shoulder, ask the extra question type of thing, like, hey, are you doing okay today? And it went both ways. I mean, you know just as well as I know that especially, when you're younger in the military, like the last person you're going to talk to is a senior leader. Like, you're just scared. You're not going to talk to them. You're not going to, but we got it to the point where, hey, open door policy everywhere. I know that's kind of cliche to say, but I don't care who you are. You can come to my office. I had a young kid Friday, 5 p.m. come in my office and be like, sir, I've been contemplating suicide for the last 5 days. Like, that never would have happened. I never would have done that as an E4 in the military, ever, and we took that I took that as a win, our parent command thought we had problems, but of course that's the stigma, right?
Yeah. And that's the astonishing part again, as I look back, I'm amazed talking to you. I'm amazed how ignorant of my own past I've been in actually thinking about these as connected events. Mm-hmm. I had a department chief, and he, his name is Donald Mondragon. Skip Mondragon he goes by Skip. And he actually wrote a book called, I believe it's Depression Isn't for Wimps.
Oh, interesting. I'm writing that down.
Retired colonel, internist, and he actually went through a major depressive disorder while on active duty and gave a grand rounds about it, which was, you want to talk about sitting back in your seat and nobody in the room is talking. Yeah. That was unheard of at the time. That was probably 2013, 15 area.
Definitely. Yeah.
Right? I mean, that was considered beyond the pale to get up in front of the hospital. And even this is a healthcare organization in the military. For a full bird department chief to get up and talk about his personal struggle with behavioral health as part of the continuing medical education for the hospital. And at the time, looking back on it, it's one of the bravest things I've seen. He's still a mentor to me. We've connected with each other since, I retired. And he was one of the folks I interviewed in my transition project of like, hey, how did you get from, you were my boss and the big bird in the chair to what you're doing now? And he's turned his experience of dealing with his mental health and coming out good on the other side as a TEDx talk and this book, and it's now kind of health for military folks and mental health for military folks is part of his mission as well. But as I think back on the response to it, a lot of it was just sort of an uncomfortable inability to deal with what he was trying to draw attention to. And it was exactly the thing that was needed because of exactly the kind of dumbed silence response he got. And then, there's people who, in private, they mocked it, which is just insane. Reprehensible. It doesn't stop them, but and like, you don't have to like what he did, but if you think anything other than that's extraordinarily brave what he just did, I don't know where you're coming from. And it's, looking back, no one was any stranger to, the prevalence or the incidence of mental health in, one of the first weeks that I was in, first couple of months that I was an intern, right? Graduate med school in May, and then you show up for active duty in June, and July 1st, they hand you a pager, and now you're taking care of patients. And one of my fellow interns, right, comes into the ER, and I walked in and I see him, and I'm like, hey man, what's going on? And he starts to tell me. I'm like, pause. And I go out and grab the attending. I'm like, dude, I really shouldn't be seeing one of my fellow colleagues for this chief complaint.
Right.
And he's like, right. And he had a history of depression, had treated, and he was having a low point, right? He was in a relapse. Like, that was not a normal, but an expected occurrence that happened. He didn't actually make it through internship, right? He struggled so much with his depression that he ended up not completing his medical training. And at the time, it was, nobody talks about this, right? Keep this quiet. Where did this guy go? It's okay. He's somewhere else now. What happened to him? And I actually had my last call night as an internal medicine resident. So it's a 3-year program. And then I stayed on as the chief medical resident. Is basically like the assistant to the assistant, right? So you're like the kind of the academic focal point staff for your first year as an attending. You work with the program director very closely and kind of help plan the academic program. And that was going to happen in like the first week of June when the other chief left. And I was taking one of my last call nights in the ICU. And my an attending, it wasn't even the attending that I was working for that time, knocks on the call room door at like 2:00 in the morning. Hey, Bubba, get up. I'm like, why are you here? You're not even on tonight. What are you doing? He's like, just come to bed 10. And it was one of my best friends. She had called him up to say goodbye and sounded a little bit garbled. And he just got kind of a weird spidey sense tingle. And he just hung up the phone and drove over to her place, kicked the door in. And she had taken a bunch of pills with a bunch of alcohol. And they got her to the ER, gave her, the appropriate treatment. And she was my patient in bed 10 as one of my best friends after her suicide attempt. I'm like, oh, okay. Welcome to chief here, right? This person's going to be a 3rd-year resident, and this is now part of, their experience and their normal. And still, that was 2005. And, I was an intern in 2002. So you got, an intern that leaves the program because of major depression. You've got somebody that attempts suicide in their 3rd year. And that's by no means, a remote experience. When I got to fellowship at Walter Reed in 2006 through 8, they had a resident commit suicide at Bethesda. Naval came off the parking deck, leapt to death. And that was, again, it was one of those things where one of the attendings pulled me, my attending, and me as a fellow. So I said, hey, you guys, you need to be a little bit, curb your sarcasm for the next little bit. I'm like, what are you talking about? The residents were hilarious.
Yeah. Right.
And then he said, yeah, a week ago, so-and-so committed suicide, and everybody's a little raw about it. I'm like, were you going to tell anybody in the faculty a week ago? You're pulling the two of us aside. If we didn't have a sarcasm problem, would you have even told us?
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, probably not. How do you...
Even just talking about that could open it up for other people to be like, hey, you know what? Maybe I need to go talk to somebody,
Right. Just to be aware that is an issue in that residency program. whether or not I'm asking other people, are you okay? It's, are you okay with this, right? With what just happened? Because even if you don't have a major depressive disorder or a mood disorder, anxiety disorder, and one of your classmates commits suicide,
it's going to, it's an effect, right? Yeah.
My expectation is that you would be affected.
Exactly. Yeah.
We just had a young man in my daughter's high school class took his own life in the first week of school. And, you get the email from the school system. Hey, just want to let everyone know that we've had an unfortunate, loss from the student body. Someone passed away last night. No details.
Right. Nothing. Yeah.
Right. They're very concerned about suicide and social contagion. And I understand that. But at the same time, for the parents, it might be important to know what, right. And my daughter was waiting to start community college, wasn't going to regular classes. So I just said, hey, did you get any email about this? I said they were going to announce it first period. Your friend has got banned. She's going to come pick you up because that's her only class today. Maybe she heard. Yeah, she heard. And it was one of my daughter's friends.
Oh, wow. And she didn't know.
And
right?
she had no idea.
Yeah.
And then, a bunch of my boys on the little league, we're doing fall ball right now, baseball, and just sent them a text on our Game Changer app, we call it, where we communicate with the team. Hey guys, if anybody's affected by today, so sorry for your loss. We understand if you're not coming to practice. And one of my guys wrote, hey coach, thanks a ton. Really appreciate it. And then my daughter says, hey, check on this guy. He's another one of your players, but they were close. Just texted him. Hey man, need anything? Just, I'm here to talk, whatever you need. And I got to cut. Hey, yeah, no, thanks coach. We talked to their family. It was important. But just, if you don't know that this happened, how are you supposed to be part of the solution?
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
Right. And it can be as simple as, hey, how are you doing?
Yeah. Simple. Yeah.
And then when they give you the supervision, everything's fine. No. That's not what I'm asking you. It's not just a, hey, how you doing? I'm literally asking you, how are you right now? I could use a minute. Good. Important for me to know that. Let me give you a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. And, those kind, but if you're not in the environment where you can actually, like you said, speak about it, and I'm sure everybody thought your unit was out to lunch. Right. What do you guys are talking about this?
And, even internally, people probably thought, look at this idiot officer up there. He's going to tell us these stories. And I'm sure there was definitely people in the crowd that probably thought less of me, but it is what it is, So,
yeah. I
wasn't going to change anything. And if I, my thing was always like, if I reach one person, I'll feel good. And we ended up reaching a ton of people, so.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I can only imagine the good that if somebody actually felt comfortable enough to come into your office and say, I've been thinking about this for 5 days. Right.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, okay, just sit down. You're going nowhere.
Yeah. Yeah. And we went straight to the ER there was a ER, local ER there in Connecticut. And I went and that's part of it too. I think there's some people might call it micromanaging. But for me, as an 03 at the time, there was nobody else that was going to the ER with this guy.
Right.
You know what I mean? I'm going to go with you. What else is more important in my life right now than making sure you get help? And there was people, I think, maybe in the senior enlisted folks and a couple other people that are like, why did you go? I'm like, well, who was going to go? I wasn't going to let him go by himself, So, and I think part of that's a thing too. I think it's like an all-inclusive, like, you just got to do the right thing and care. That's to me, it's simple, but I don't think it's as simple as it can be portrayed to be.
Yeah,
for people to actually do it.
Well, I think a lot of people mix up simple and easy.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
It is simple. It just doesn't mean it's easy. And but if you beyond your impact on that person that was able to, come through your door and ask for help, don't underestimate your impact on other people feeling empowered to be available for and recognizing. I again, you're making me think of a lot of things that I just sort of put somewhere. Another one of my mentees, I came back to my office. This was I was a junior faculty and had a bunch of proteges, and I get to my office, and this person had a pretty tumultuous life, and had undergone a lot of stressors in addition to their training stressors,
Right.
family situation, both directed and direct family and extended family. And at some point, I ended up staying at my place because his domestic situation was a bit untenable for a little while. And it was funny, actually. It was my hockey night, right? So I'm like, I'm going to hockey, so you're coming with. I said, I know you're not a huge sports fan, but hey, grab a book and sit in the stands and watch a bunch of chuckleheads at beer league. Well, he borrowed the book when he went back to his house, and then I come back to my office a few month later, and the book is there on my desk, and like a note, hey, sir, thanks for everything. Just wanted to return this to you. And I'm like, oh, and it suddenly clicked. It's okay, I'm now, cleaning up the ledger before I'm done, kind of. So I went and grabbed my chief resident. She was in her office, and I said, hey, have you seen? She goes, let me just stop you. I grabbed so-and-so when they came in because they looked terrible. I closed the door and asked them what was up, and I just escorted them up to the psych floor. They've been admitted.
Wow.
And she thanked me. She goes, and I wanted to thank you for, looking after him, and also, putting me in a situation where I knew that I would get backed up by you and the program director. Program director was also big on this kind of thing that I worked for. You guys, I knew you'd have my back, and it wouldn't be a problem for me to do the right thing.
That's awesome.
And I was just like, because I was Josh, I was terrified after I realized
what was going on,
what him returning stuff to me meant. Because he returned a few other things too, and I'm like, okay, none of my residents ever returns anything they borrow. They're like the worst neighbors in the world, right? They just, I'm going to borrow this, and I'm never going to bring it back. The fact that it was all on my desk, I'm like, oh no, I know what that means. And I was terrified.
I had a similar one where it was, me and the guy on duty. I just happened to be talking with we had one guy on watch all the time, and one guy had self-reported and said, hey, I'm going to go home and do this or whatever, or I'm going to go to the hospital or whatever it was going to do. But it sounded like he was going to do the right thing. So we just kind of let him walk out the door. And then I remember looking at the other guy. He looked at me, I looked at him, and I said, I don't think we just did the right thing, did we?
Yeah.
And we went and snagged him real quick. I said, hey, we're going to all go together, and just to make sure. I was like, that the last thing we want to do is let this person just leave. So, but.
Yeah. And it's that, I think that kind of thing where, you're on duty with the other guy, and you're at least both in an environment where it's okay for you to have even said that, and for him to be like, oh yeah, did we do the right thing? Because you're at least willing to ask the question out loud instead of, thank God we didn't have to deal with that. He's just going to
let him go on his own. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, that's cool. I think we've had a lot of good mental health discussion. Would you want to let people know a little bit more about about your executive coaching thing, where they can find you, things like that?
Yeah. So the website is functionalmentoring.com. It's all one word, no underscore, dash, or anything. Functional mentoring, just the way it's spelled. And that's my website for. And as an Army guy, this just pains me to use a Navy metaphor, but you'll smile. It's for getting your ships sailing true, right? Leadership, mentorship, relationship, and followership. And I collaborate with an old Army buddy that he was kind of the peer mentor that I needed. He was my intern when I was a resident, and then later when my career was floundering. He sort of helped me see the light of, hey, yeah, you've been doing this and this and this, but do you want to be right or do you want to be effective?
Right.
And I'm like, that's okay. I literally needed to hear that, and I'm able to hear it right now. So he and I, during the pandemic, you get bored and come up with these great projects because you got nothing else to do. So Paul and I started writing, leadership and mentorship thought pieces. And that just, that kept going. So, we write about, something as tactical as, okay, what are the good elements of feedback if you're going to give somebody feedback? And then something as thought provoking as, how do you design your own environment for your own mental well-being, right? Like, have you created a place for yourself where, you can just go be you and, help yourself get recentered and anything in between. So,
that blog's right on the website.
Yeah. Functionalmentoring.com. It's almost exclusive to the blog. There is kind of a pop-up of, hey, if you want to reach out and contact me.
Right.
But it's not a very salesy, in your face marketing kind of site.
I know we were joking about that before. About
there's a landing page and a pop-up page that I'm sure if I ever do any advertising, I'll eventually point people to, but you can pretty much read the blog and be unharassed. I'll ask for your email, but just because I want to send you the blog in your inbox. And it's not, I don't overdo it. I try to have a real life anyway. So I think I publish like every other Friday.
Okay.
And I do long form stuff, about 1,000, 1,200 words. Paul does the short, pithy thing. Like he said to me, you want to be right or effective. He does those in between every other. And our goal really is something comes out once a week. And most of the time it's us playing off each other. Like he put one out about, whether things are easy or difficult and depending on how much we want them. And that just kind of sent me off on about a month's worth of writing about the difference between, simple, easy, complicated, and difficult. Right. So I'll write a piece that's basically like, we all would love things to either be simple and easy, right, or complicated and difficult, because then that gives us an excuse.
Right. True.
And more than likely, it's the other two quadrants of that 2x2 table that we're going to be living in. Something is going to be simple and difficult, and everybody is out there looking for complicated but easy, right? So go on, look for the marketing things on YouTube. So like, how do I lose weight? And there's going to be some joker out there who's going to be telling you that you're eating the wrong berries, and it's because your intermittent fasting routine is 7 hours and 54 minutes instead of 8 hours and 16 minutes. It's not that complicated, guys.
Right.
How do you lose? For 90% of us, how do you lose weight? You walk more and eat less. But simple. That's hard. It's simple, but it's hard. I mean, I don't want to put down the chocolate covered Twinkies. I want to eat those. And I would much rather take the car than walk. So what I need to do is distract myself from simple and difficult and go look for complicated and easy. And in that hunt, while I'm looking for the guru that's going to give me the secret so that it can be easy, I'll still accomplish nothing, but I'll feel like I'm doing something. So,
exactly.
1,200 words, two blog posts about that kind of conundrum where I even call myself out. I'm like, I do it too, right? I'm sitting in my music studio. I don't even tell it,
Yeah.
Guitars and amps behind me. When I re-engaged with my music habit after retiring, man, I signed up for an online community, and then another online thing came. Ooh, I'm going to buy that set of lessons. Dude, I have probably 5 different fully contained, go from, intermediate to advanced guitar curricula. Guess how many I've actually cracked 75% of complete on? One.
Yeah.
One, right? Because I get another one. I'm like, ooh, this must be the secret. It's not the secret. My teachers actually got the secret. Shut up and play.
Yeah.
Right?
Just play. Yeah.
Play more. Stop. Get off the freaking internet. Put on a backing track and jam to it. Now go to a club that has a jam night. You're afraid. You're gonna suck. It's fine. Everyone sucks their first few times. He's like, I did too, and I'm now a professional recording musician. Just go sign up anyway. Bring your guitar and your amp, and just try and keep up. Okay. It's difficult as hell, but it's so simple, right? So those are the kind of thought pieces that we'll put out. I got something coming out. I think the latest thing I just published was where we kind of kill people with kindness and soft expectations, and we're not really being nice. I think it was a response to another podcast I heard that said, some people just aren't good at traditional school, and that's okay. No, that's not a good way to be kind. Okay. Because your natural inclination might not be, easy test taker, good study habits, and all the rest of it. That doesn't mean you can't learn those things. Right. And to say it's okay to just not be good at that is cutting that person off from a lot of self-improvement and development opportunity. when what you just need to admit is, okay, you're right. You're terrible at taking tests and you're terrible at studying, but you can learn those things and get less terrible at them. And it's
Right.
not okay to just say, I have a fixed mindset. I'm just the way that I am. And right? It cuts you off from a growth mindset where you just say, all right, well, all of those things I'm lousy at, those are the opportunities for me to grow.
Yeah.
So that turned into a couple of posts. And what I'm hoping is that all of this, professional, again, we did it for 20 years. It was an extra duty as assigned, but it's up here. And, somebody might benefit from reading it before they absolutely need it and, get a little bit better at being a leader or being a follower or being a mentor. So,
Yeah. Well, I think for the both of us and for a lot of retired and post-military people, it's that give back piece that at least I know you do, and I do. We find is the important piece to kind of, I don't want to say give us something to do, but that missing piece for us post military career.
Yeah, and it's a new. I think it's a new application of the same thing that we always do. Like we wanted to save a junior officer that, hey,
Right.
if you don't do your OER support form, you're going to get a lousy evaluation because your
Right.
leader has a million things to do and they're not in the weeds with you. You got to help advertise yourself to get a good evaluation. Okay. Well, now I have a new thing that I've been through that I would want to save other people from, which is transitioning from the military to being a civilian. And, even people telling me, hey, start 2 years early. I did.
Yeah.
And I wish I'd started 3 years
Earlier, I know.
right. And, I have friends and colleagues that had the most amazing careers in the military and did not give their transition the appropriate attention it deserved for a variety of reasons. Sometimes it was, higher ranking officers taking advantage of the fact, well, I need you. You're so competent. I can't work without you. Dude, to do the right thing for this person and not just have them be, your toady to help you advance.
Right.
You've got to let them go. You've got to train a new person to help you, and you've got to pay it forward to this person to help them get out and be productive. I had somebody who was a hospital commander who ended up working at an urgent care because it was the only job they could find. And it was like a family favor to them because they had no time to plan their transition.
Right.
I'm like, whoa. I'm like, you were an absolute rock star in uniform. You should be a chief. You should be a C-suite officer at a large health system.
Right.
But that takes a while to set that up and get through. So, and the other thing that again, that's why I'm so interested in your mission is it's the time. One of the things I heard from probably 60-70% of the folks that I interviewed, and I interviewed a good dozen and a half people at various, stages of their transition. They almost uniformly mentioned that was the time to start focusing on your physical and your mental health.
Mm-hmm.
Because you wanted those things in order and diagnosed and started to manage or under control before you then added on the stressor of, okay, and now my entire life is changing, right? Because your routine, I mean, you get it. I'm in a suit coat. I had to buy people clothes.
Yeah, I know, right? What do I do with these? How do I size myself for this? What are these for?
Right? How do I dress for this occasion? Because you could probably still quote if somebody called you up, hey, what do I wear to this? Oh yeah, that's class A's, that's class B's, it's this dress, it's that utility, right? What do you wear to this fundraising thing you go to? Is it, I don't know, is it formal? Is it business casual? Is it somewhere? Is it black tie? What does all that mean? You don't know these things, and all of that, and the change in routine, and like I said, I have a peer mentoring coffee. We haven't done it in a few months because we got busy with our kids, but we would meet once a week, like clockwork. Just hit a Starbucks, grab a coffee, and hey, how's your business going? How's your spouse and your kids? Hey, here's how my thing is going. Just checking in with each other.
Yeah. Because
we shared an office for 2 years. Right. And you're like, that was my daily routine. Now I've even shifted it back to a weekly, but those kind of things are going to change. Your normal is not going to be the same normal. Why would you then add on? It's more difficult to access the healthcare system retired than active duty. It's just the way it is.
Yeah.
Right. You've got all of this transition work to do. And we're so averse to focusing on ourselves in uniform.
Yeah.
Right. It's a selfless profession, and God bless it as being so. It's you're signing up to potentially sacrifice your life for your country. Okay. Well, to maintain that mindset for 17, 18 years, and then to say, okay, I've served, I'm proud of that, and now I've got to take care of me. You just can't turn that switch on. You don't even know how to do that, right? And then you get out and you don't know how to do a lot of the civilian culture things. So, trying to save people that stress and those missteps.
And then, like you said, the other side of it, the leadership that are still in need to let the folks transitioning, that give them the time. I was lucky enough where I was at a place where I was afforded that time, but like you said, a lot of people aren't.
Yeah.
And one person told me, I remember my friend that had retired, he beat me by like 3 years. He said, the one thing that really freaked me out was the day after I retired, my phone stopped ringing. I said, I didn't think of it. And I was glad he told me that, because it was literally like night and day. I went from being 24/7 on call for the last 3 years to phone ringing at least 5 times a day for stuff, right? And then the next day, nothing. So,
Yep.
that leader that's making that person do all this crazy work and try to transition at the same time is going to forget about that person the day after they retire. You know what I mean? At least from the work perspective.
100%.
So, but this was great, Chris. I appreciate you coming on. I think we had some great discussions here tonight. Maybe we can do another one of these at some point and continue the discussion. But like I said, for everybody listening, I'm going to say it again: the great Dr. Christopher Colombo on, great friend. We used to play hockey a lot together back in the day, and I think he gave, funny story we can share in a different one, but giving me cardiology tips when I was going through my cardiology problems back in 2013 maybe. But again, Chris, great to have you on today, and I
appreciate you having me, man. It's great to connect, and I really appreciate the work you're doing.
Great, thanks, man. And I will have you guys will see links to his website on all our social media and everything when this episode gets published. Thanks again for listening in, and thanks, Chris, for coming on.
Yeah, my pleasure.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Remember, raise your banner if you're somebody can turn to in a time of need, or raise your banner if you just need help. And please remember, you're not alone. There are resources out there, whether national hotlines, local hotlines, friends, family, or professionals. They are out there. The Raise Your Banner podcast is produced by the Raise Your Banner Foundation in conjunction with research conducted by Matrixa Research Group, and your host is Josh Robichaud. Artwork is from the talented Jenna Bordinger, and music is by the talented Josiah DJ Slobo Renton.